It's a vibe with five, and you already know this.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you got here myself, Joel Bayer, Rio Ferdinand, and of course we've got a very, very special guest, the current Portugal national team manager, the man himself, FA Cup winner as well, we have to add, Mr. Roberto Martinez. How you doing?
Very well, thank you.
I like when we do these interviews to go back and just to give the audience an understand an idea of just who we're dealing with here and who we're sitting next to. So the first time I came across your name was Swansea. Mm-hmm. And not just because our Swansea played in our country and that, but it was just the style of football, like that you kind of had at that football club. And one of the a guy I work with now, Ashley Williams, who worked under you, was saying like, "Wow, the guy just brought new ideas." Mm-hmm. How did you give us an idea of how you ended up at Swansea?
Well, it's a very interesting name because Ashley Williams clearly was a bit of a catalyst of what we were trying to do. So just to go back, I was enjoying my football. I was at that time 33 years old, and I arrived in '95. Remember that we go back to the Bosman ruling, '95, opening the doors in Europe, and 3 Spanish players. We were brought to Wigan in the northwest, the division of Dave Whelan, the owner of Wigan Athletic, and that's where it started. Obviously, I've been brought up for 15 years telling you that you can't lose the ball even in training, and then we arrive in the old 3rd division, and all it is a bit of a gaining territorial advantage and winning second balls and putting the ball in the mixer as quick as you can. And it's almost like contrasting, and it's almost you realize, well, what's right and what's wrong. It's a beautiful debate, really. And
just to go a bit on that point, sorry to interrupt you, second balls.
Yeah.
It's crazy how that was the second or third thing you mentioned there in terms of adapting to English football. Exactly what Pep said that he didn't get right in the first season, adapting to second balls. Talk me through how you adapt to that from coming from where you came from, possession football.
Well, I think you don't adapt. That's the thing. You need to come to terms that second balls, second balls in Spain is a negative. It's almost the aspect you don't want a second ball. That means that you lost your possession, that you've done something wrong, or your first touch wasn't good, or your pass, or your decision. In the other aspect is no, winning the second ball is a way of being successful. And again, it goes into styles and what you like. Football is about styles and what you believe and what you like. What is good is being very, very good as a team in the style that you play in. So obviously, what that second ball, the focus on second ball, opens a transition. The Premier League, the British game, is the strongest in those 5 seconds when you lose the ball and 5 seconds you win the ball. In the other leagues, in Spain, we used to win the ball back, and it used to be just play back, get in position, and just let's attack. When you come to the British game, you've got no time to think or get organized. You need to straight away. You need to react, and you need to affect the game. Yeah, and it's here that slowly, as a player in the lower leagues, I always felt, yes, I'm doing this because I have to do it to help my team and to be in the starting lineup. But I think there is another way. We shouldn't have to lose the ball. If we can focus on defending with the ball, a concept that in '95, '96 we never had in the lower leagues. It was about getting high up the pitch as quick as you can and what you can do with the second ball. And then I think I became a manager while I was playing as a player and experimenting.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, when did you start thinking like that?
That was '95 when I arrived. And obviously all of a sudden you got a manager that it tells you things that in your development phase, it was almost the contradiction. Opposite. And we're talking about the same sport. And I think that's a beautiful culture behind any football team or any league. It represents a culture of many years playing the game. And then is when I arrived at Swansea City, I was the captain there 6 months previously. I had a relationship with all my players. I knew exactly where they were going to celebrate when they were winning, where they were going to get together. I knew what the players could do, the quality that they had. And it's there when I'm trying to almost stimulate them or give them the opportunity to, why can we not play differently? If we're going to be playing the same than the others, a little bit there's going to be whoever got the best budget is going to finish first, second and third. We need to find a way to be very different. And that's where Leon Britton, that you will remember that name, he was a right winger. And when I arrived, obviously Leon was exceptional in that ball control, in tight positions. And I told him, Leon, I need you as a number 6.
He grew up at West Ham, by the way, just so you know. As a West Ham Academy player, the famous West Ham Academy, teach you how to pass and receive the ball.
Absolutely, yeah. And many times he mentioned your name. During that time, he was, I think it was a big investment, £400,000 at that time.
Wow.
And he's a footballer that I knew we could rely on him. And he started playing in front of the two centre halves.
How do you convince a player who's grown up as a right winger to then go in as the central part of your team as a defensive, like the Rodri, the Declan Rice role now?
And I think that's exactly asking the player to do what he's good at. I think you never convince a player when you ask him to do something that the field doesn't feel. The player doesn't feel comfortable. Obviously, with Leon I'm sure that conversation was a little bit strange on him, because at that time we expected the number 6 should be someone physical, someone that could win the second ball, someone that could be good in the aerial play. And I told him, all you're going to be measured is if you can get to the 100 passes per game. Can you give us those angles? Can you play forward? Can you play in between lines? Clearly for him, a player that he loved the technical quality and been with the ball, and it doesn't need any persuasion, and that's where we developed something that it became stronger than the quality of the individuals. We're talking about players that we were League 1, League 2, that they were able to progress, become champions, get into the Premier League and have a career in the Premier League. I remember Leon, it was beautiful to watch from the distance, looking, his stats were comparable to Xavi at Barcelona, and the numbers that he was getting in the Premier League were of that caliber. And it's beautiful to see where that was coming from.
Never even looked at for England.
No, because
crazy.
sometimes
when you talk, stats like that are coming up.
Yes, and I think that's what I'm trying to do as a national team coach. I'm trying to look at that stat that it shows you the outstanding quality of a player. And it doesn't need to be a popular player, it doesn't need to be a player that it comes from a specific journey, that we all know the clubs that normally feed the national team. And I always was intrigued with that player, that he had that exceptional quality, that it can come from stats, or can come from watching a game, that he can do a specific role, that it makes the team different. And I think Leon's case is a very, very interesting one.
So there's one thing about Leon, but how were you able to convince some of the other players? Now, let's not forget, this is a lower division at the time. You know, in my opinion, or from what I think, it might be easier to tell players with maybe higher quality that they can shift positions. But when you have other players who might not really be able to do what it is that you want them to do, how do you go about managing that?
Winning. I think there is nothing more that convinces you is about winning. But Rio will tell you, if you ask a player, you need to work off the ball, you need to run without the ball, it's harder to convince. Obviously, what we're trying to explain here is it's very easy to convince a player to say we're going to go from having 150 passes per game to try to get 900 passes per game. We're going to try to keep the ball. There are aspects that you need to become really, really fit, because the fitness with the ball is very different to the fitness without the ball. But the player enjoy that aspect. So I don't think it's a hard work to convince a player. What is hard is to win consistently, to make sure that the idea is powerful enough for the player to keep it in practice. And
you're talking about a style of play here, and getting players and identifying players to kind of implement that style that you're looking for. Before that, who kind of inspires you to see the game the way you do it?
For me, I was a young boy in Spain. It was Johan Cruyff.
Oh.
Johan Cruyff arrived at Barcelona, and all of a sudden, it changed everything. Not many people remembers that the time that Johan Cruyff arrived at Barcelona, it was really tough. The club didn't have an identity. It was very, very far between the times that they could win the league. And he came in, and he was very, very powerful with the way that he committed to a style of football. Everything else happened as a consequence of that. And I think that's a little bit is concentrating on the process. If you know how you win, you'll be able to affect that win for the longer objective, rather than the culture of winning at all costs. Winning at all costs is great, and it happens that sometimes you need to do that in specific tournaments, but creating a style is a lot easier to fit the players in the specific roles, to have a culture in the dressing room that you can measure winning and losing a little bit further than just the result. And I think those aspects at that time at Swansea made total sense, because we didn't have the budget to be able to compete with the clubs that they were in the same level. At that time we had Leeds, we had Nottingham Forest. If we were going to play the same way that these clubs, they got the better budgets, normally they're going to finish above. But because we developed a style of football that it was more powerful than the quality of the individuals. Slowly the recruitment became very clear. We brought 10 players, and one of them, the biggest investment, was Ashley Williams, specific players that they could fit in a role that is very different. The centre half at that time, it wasn't asked to be on the ball 60, 70 times in a game, being able to defend 1v1s, being able to defend with big spaces at the back. The whole role of each position changes completely. So you need this type of player. We wanted 1v1 situations in the wide area, so all of a sudden we needed to have 5 wingers in every squad. We didn't have...
Who was it then? It was Nathan Dyer, Routledge?
That was after, We started with Tom Butler.
Oh, wow.
Tom Butler, that he came from Sunderland, who had an incredible 1v1 situation. Then Mark Gower. After it was...
Mark Gower. I played with him as a 15, 16-year-old.
In West Ham?
No, it was England.
Okay.
When we were kids. He was at Spurs, Mark Gower.
Yes, he was.
Did you get him? Did he go Southend?
Southend, yeah. We got him from Southend. But he was very specific players that sometimes we would see in other clubs that they weren't even playing because obviously the style wouldn't suit them. And then for us, they were players very important.
You've mentioned you don't care the names, you don't really care as long as they fit your profile. Take someone like Ashley Williams, for example. What did he bring to your team?
Well, with Ashley, we always felt that he had this leadership, this guy that I think if he was committed, he could do whatever he needed to do. We saw him play, and we always felt he would be incredible on the ball and allowing to have the starting lines of passes. Even though that's not something that he was doing, it would be great to speak with Ashley one day and see how long it took him just to change a little bit, because the first game, straight away, his initial first 4 or 5 balls, I remember, they were long into the channel, which is a very British way
to... He was going like, what is this? What have I brought in?
And then slowly became this calm, composed, and someone that he could easily understand what the opposition needed to be broken the defensive structure. We can play inside, outside, one side or the other, and that's what that leadership obviously was. Welsh at that time, we felt that it could be someone could become important for Wales. For us, you think in the more internationals that we can have on the pitch, you cannot underestimate what a player when he goes into the international scene. And that's something that I started to see how different it was for a player to play for the national team. You want to play for the club and you are part of the objectives, but there is something, is a bit of a spark in your eye when the player goes with the national team.
That's interesting, because you see with most managers, my thought is that yes, you want quality of an international player, but you don't really want them to be going out there too much because it affects you. But it sounds like you're saying, no, get out there. The more we have you out there, the better it is for my team.
I think that is something I suffered. Obviously, international football and domestic football don't go hand by hand. That's a reality, and we all need to accept it. But the truth is that what we are sharing is the player. The player is a more valuable player and a better player and a more prepared player when the player is international, and he has experiences of playing a World Cup or having to qualify, or those moments of pressure that you don't get with a club. So for me, it's always trying to put the player at the center and being using a bit of common sense. I'm the national team coach of Portugal now. We got a March period with 2 friendlies. I try to put myself in the shoes of a manager in a club. I wouldn't expect my player to play 290 minutes. And I think that's trait of responsibility to manage it well. In the same way, when I speak with the managers at the club, they understand you meet up 5 times a year, you have to prepare a World Cup or a European Championship. You got no margin of error. So they understand it. What they want is that you are really thinking about the player and you bring in a bit of common sense. And we did that in March. We called up 32 players instead of having just 23 players. We gave everyone 1 game. First, makes us stronger because we can see the competition for places in a country like Portugal, to have 32 players that they can be in a European Championship, and it gives a little bit of an opportunity to the players to go into the final third of the competition refreshed and full of energy to go into.
It's common sense, isn't it? It is common sense with stuff like that, and I think that'll help you in the long run, because I always came in. I knew there was always friction between managers at international level and domestic. We'll come back to that a bit later. Obviously we had you come in, so I've done a bit of research looking at Johan Cruyff was an inspiration. Am I right in saying you have a relationship with Jordi Cruyff, his son now? Yes. How did that come about, and what's the situation there?
Yeah, well, obviously with Jordi, He's
Are you
got
picking his
nothing-
brains? Are you just picking his brains for more information?
It sounds that way, but it's not. It came as an accident. Obviously, Jordi Cruyff signed for Manchester United in '96, and I was in Wigan Athletic in '95, and we got to know each other, and it was an incredible way to, after training, sit down and speak about football and how fascinating it was, everything that we learned in Spain and how different it was in the British game. And then it became just more of a relationship. But that was completely separate aspects. Obviously, his dad, what he did in football in general, I think affected, I would say that is the figure in world football that affected the most, because as a player what he achieved, and then it's just as a manager, there are not many footballers that they can become empathetic to be managers in a way that they understand that the players that they're going to manage, they're not going to be able to do what they were doing as players. And I think what Johan Cruyff brought really changed my way of thinking, in terms of that you need to have a vision, you need to be quite stubborn in the way that you want to achieve that, because changes of culture, of way of playing doesn't happen overnight. But is the individual. Is how can you see the individual fitting in the structure of the team? It's not systems. It's the first time that you wouldn't talk about systems. Johan Cruyff always played a system on the ball, a system off the ball. Depending on the opposition, we'll have a high line or we defend a little bit deeper. Everything would be the reaction as soon as they lost the ball. So the concepts that we never, at that times in the 80s, it was more about what your role as a player in a 4-4-2 or what your role in a back five. Everything changed. It was more about what are you as a player, how can we use what you are into a structure of the team. And I think that changed completely. Then I followed many managers. What Toshak did when he came to Spain with Real Sociedad was incredible. He was competing tactically against Real Madrid and Barcelona. The organization of Arrigo Sacchi in Italy, what Pacho Maturana did with the Colombian team. You always pick things. All the managers, we all different.
You're a historian of the game, man.
I was going to say, historian, student.
Yeah.
My life, I just say, I always thank my dad. My dad introduced me to football. I never knew that it was another way that football is a way of living in our home. My dad won at the weekend. We were happy for a week. When he lost, we were all upset. And that was the way I understood it should be.
Do you know the talking about someone like, and keeping it on the Barcelona theme, talking about Johan Cruyff, talking to the younger audience, somebody like Pep seems like he was hugely influenced by Johan Cruyff. Are there any parallels in the way that they work and also the way you work as well with your teams?
Yeah, totally. But remember, there is one thing is the essence, and then the methodology, what you're gonna do is more down to your experience. Johan Cruyff only managed Barcelona, really, and that was one club in his career. And Pep Guardiola followed to the T the idea that Johan Cruyff brought, but then he adapted it to the modern game. He went away and he was successful in the Bundesliga, in a club like Bayern. Then he came to the Premier League and he adapted again, and he's always been capable of finding solutions. That's an evolving, though. It would be very unfair to say that he follows the essence of Johan Cruyff, yes, but I think he's developed. What he is as a coach is the trajectory that he had and the experiences. Is constantly adapting and finding answers to make his players better on the pitch. So we saw the concepts of when Lam was coming inside as a fullback, playing the fullbacks inside, the different aspects that we've seen with Manchester City last season to win the Champions League with John Stones. This is down to getting the best out of the players that you have, and I think that's something that probably is the idea of Johan Cruyff philosophy, but he doesn't follow a specific pattern. I think he's done his own way.
We have Wigan fans that are going to be watching this as well, and they'll be very upset with us if we don't talk about the journey of what you did for them as a club, the partnership together. You seem like someone who you've known your identity from a very long time, even as a player. How was it when Wigan approached you? did they say that they want those specific tools, or did you go to them and say that, or how did that all work?
No, obviously, I think it's when you talk about Wigan Athletic, it's a club close to heart. I arrived here in '95. I couldn't speak a word of English, and we became very, very close. Wigan Athletic became the footballing family. But everything goes down to the visionary that he was, Dave Whelan, in football. He was someone that he grabbed the football club of his hometown, and he set 3 objectives that I'd never seen anyone else talking on a table. He said, I'm going to build a new 25,000 seater. I'm going to get the club in the Premier League, and one day we'll play in Europe. When I met Mr. Wool in '95, and he tells you those 3 aspects, it sounds...
You think he's crazy?
Okay. Well, no, you think, it's great. It's a great selling speech, but it's more a salesman rather than a reality. And then all of a sudden, you see the way he works, and you start believing on that. So I spent 6 years with him as a player. We got promoted. We went to the new stadium. He took... I think getting to the Premier League was a harder journey that he expected. And then I went away. I went to Swansea, and then at the age of 33, I get a phone call from Mr. Woolen at that point to become the manager of the club in the Premier League at the age of 35. He felt that he was part of the full circle that he started, and I couldn't say no. So from that point, it was almost a position that I had to fight. That they had 2 of the 3 objectives that he mentioned. A 25,000 seater, all-seater. The club was in the Premier League. The next one was to get in Europe. And everything was, as strange as it sounds, it was to try to get into that objective. That it could sound a little bit outrageous, if you want, but I think you need to have... The higher the dream, the higher that achievement. That's always the case.
Wow. And celebrations, nothing like, I'm sure.
Yes, I enjoyed working with Dave Whelan, because he would be just trying to help as much as he could. He was very honest. He would tell you from the beginning, that's what we have, and we need to trying to find our own options. But I remember he was always, he had this big smile coming in transfer deadline. He would try to come in, say, there's anything I can do, and he would always produce. So we would bring a player in the last second, or we try to help. And obviously for Wigan Athletic at that point, our title was to stay in the Premier League. Just if you could get 40 points. And we did that the first season. We did it well before the first game. The second went right down to the 68th minute of the last game of the season. And those achievements, they were much celebrated. We were the only club of winning the FA Cup and getting relegated. The difference in 4 days is probably the highest moment of the club's history. And then a low moment for us as a
How do you deal with that as a manager, but also just even as a human being?
Well, I think as a human being, you deal the same way that you deal with any disappointment. You try to see why. I think you need to be autocritical and see why. What could it be done that it could avoid that? And then you need to pass it on to the fans. At that point, it was difficult because we just won the FA Cup, which is the biggest achievement in the club's history. And then we got relegated. It's difficult we felt we couldn't celebrate. You can't do an open bus and go to the town to celebrate. And it was the fans that they actually said, look, our journey is about trying to get promoted. We know we're going to get relegated, and it's about getting reset and go back up. But the silverware, that's what it makes us as a football club. And we had to celebrate. And it was the fans that show us the direction, and it was a little bit difficult for the players to get into an open bus.
A few beers, sort that out.
Yeah, well, remember Rio, we had 22 nationalities in that dressing room.
Wow.
So that is another aspect. But the beers, it would be maybe touched by 2 or 3 players, no many more.
The Scottish
and
ones.
the culture, yes, I am brew. That was. But the fascinating aspect is that the Wigan fans were the ones that they told us what we should do. We should do in that period, and it was celebrate like winning the FA Cup deserved, and then just reset, and the next step of the football club would be to try to get back into the Premier League.
So you had Joe, you had loads of great moments in that period, even just changing a club's whole playing style, the way you did. That's a successful achievement in itself. So there must have been loads of opportunities that come off the back of that. Like what type of opportunities from other clubs that we probably don't even know about that came on your table?
Well, I was very fortunate, as you say. I think every season, at the end of the season, there were options. But I think the fascinating aspect was I felt first very supported by the chairman. I think he empowered my position, and that was never in question. But I think the fans played a big role because they were patient. Obviously, remember that we tried to support a style that all of a sudden the ball would take 6, 7, 10 passes before it gets into the box, and that was sometimes to manage the crowd, to be able to accept that the players could do that. That was the looking back, the proudest moment was to try to get the football club to have that patience for the players to be able to develop that style.
Concept of football.
Yes, and obviously there are certain parameters. As a manager, you're not stupid to follow something that is not going to take you somewhere. You got certain parameters, and when I took the job at Wigan, it was interesting. We played 33 times against the top 4, and we never won a game. Wigan Athletic never won a game in 33 in 4 seasons. So the idea was, okay, we need to find a style that we need to be at the top 4, and the idea was to start playing well against the top 4, even losing, because you're not expected to win, and that would make us stronger to play against the rest of the other teams. And that's where we started slowly to have a different idea, playing against the top 4. At that time was Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Arsenal. It was about our own way to measure it was how many passes we can do, how many shots on target, how many times, how many final thirds, entries. We would measure everything. The scoreline, we knew we couldn't reach the level to win just yet. And slowly, we ended up beating all the top 4. We beat Arsenal home and away. We beat Liverpool home and away. We beat Man United at home, and the only one who was missing then was Man City, and it was in the FA Cup final. But I think looking back, that was the biggest satisfaction, is to almost build the football club to accept a new style through defeats, because it wasn't that all of a sudden you were going to win constantly weekend in, weekend out, because it wasn't.
Who was the toughest? You mentioned the top 4 there. It interests me this. Who's the toughest teams that you had to prepare your team for?
Well, at that time, I think when we were at Wigan Athletic, you had to be perfect at everything to win a football game. So I don't think it was one. It's just every team was very strong at something. When we played out against Arsenal, you knew you had to try to stop the possession and the way that the movement they had in the central areas. When you played against Man United, there was that mentality of going to the last second, believing that they were going to win. Chelsea, this individual talent that all of a sudden came together. Every team was really pushing you at something. It wasn't that it was one team above the other. They were all challenging for us. You analyze the game from a physical, technical, tactical, and psychological, and probably you had to be perfect in the 4 to win games, which is not the case when you're a top 4 team.
Very difficult,
Yeah, but I think it's where you could go down to measuring success away from the scoreline.
Going back to what Rio was talking about earlier on, I saw that there were links for you to Madrid, Spurs, even United at one point. Why didn't any of those materialise, or was it just paper talk, or what was going on?
No, I think it's happened. I do feel that in our position you have to be. The timing is everything. I would never walk out of a job. I don't think that's right. It shouldn't be. And majority of the situations that they came, majority of times happen when you have to walk away from a job. And I would never do that. I think there is always a time. There is at the end of the season or at the end of in international football, it's a big tournament, and there are cycles. I always believe in the jobs. It's not managing a club or managing a national team. It's you work for a person that they believed, or a group of people that they believed in you, and that human aspect. I would never break it. And there's been opportunities, but it meant that I had to let someone down, and I don't accept that.
What do you enjoy? This last question on this segment. What do you enjoy most? Club management or international management?
They are both completely different. And that's interesting. The first 3 months that I took the job internationally at 2016, I was not enjoying the day to day, because you go from 7 years constantly in the Premier League that is always looking forward, and it's almost you got no time to look back. Really, everything is assessing the tomorrow, and then all of a sudden you arrive to the international football and it's almost the opposite. You need to look back. Everything is about analysing what happened yesterday, analysing what the players did yesterday, and try to come with an idea. And that was difficult. But the moment that I understood that was completely a different job within the same sport, then the enjoyment is exactly the same. So it's completely different. Club level, you got the contact with the players every day. You go through disappointment.
More stress every day.
No, I wouldn't say stress. No, I think the stress is when you are not prepared. I always feel in football the stress is when you go to something and you haven't done everything that you should have done. We all love the big games. We all love the uncertainty of winning and losing. The stress is when you feel that we're not fully prepared. I think those are the moments. And you try to avoid that. With experience, you try to avoid, you prioritize a lot, and international football forces you to do that. You have to prioritize. You cannot work. You got 3 days to prepare a game. You cannot work at everything. You're not going to defend the box, press high, have the ball, not having the ball. You have to prioritize a lot in the concepts you're going to work. And then as long as you work on those, you can go and enjoy the game.
Clear.
Even though there's no margin of error. But I would say club football and international football are many aspects at club level that you can achieve by building the synchronization, the perfection in tactical concepts. To go to international, that is this organization in terms of creating a psychological spirit that allows you to win, no margin of error, because you make a mistake and you're out of the tournament and you have to wait 4 years to come back to that tournament. So the aspects are completely different.
I think that's a great segue into the next part.
100%. Guys, please make sure you keep on watching this fantastic interview with Mr. Roberto Martinez.